All right, here we go. Another podcast coming from the West Coast again. Tonight I have a gentleman who is a square dance caller, international square dance caller. He owns several, or is in charge of several record labels. We're going to talk about that. Tonight I have Buddy Weaver. How are you, sir?
Terrific, Charlie. How are you tonight?
I'm doing fantastic. Now, where are you in California? We met a couple years ago, but we talked a little bit, so I wanted to talk to you. Where are you exactly in California?
I live in North County, San Diego. So it's, for most people, they understand where San Diego, California is. Way down south.
Okay. How long have you been there?
We came here in 1995. My wife and I and our little baby, who's now a mom. She's been a mom for all of 2 months now.
Wow.
And
Okay.
so, yeah, we came here in 95. Before that, we're all from Hawaii originally.
Okay. Now, so you're from Hawaii. I noticed I was looking at your website and all that. I've looked at your website a lot in the years that I've known about you. So you born in Hawaii. How long were you there?
Well, still for the majority of our life, we lived in Hawaii.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, we left there as adults, and then we came to California in 95. And really, we came here because it was a better schooling choices for our daughter at the time. Since then, of course, we had another daughter, too, and they both gone to the school district and moved on. One went to UCLA, and the other one went to Pepperdine, and went to grad school for both of them. So it was a good choice. It was a good choice coming here for them.
That's fantastic. Now, any plans on going back now that they're grown and everything?
No way, man. I live in the land of milk and honey over here in Southern California.
Okay.
You can't pry me out of here.
With my wife and I, we visited Hawaii one time. What we did is 3 years ago was our 30th anniversary. And so we took a flight. We flew to California, out to Hawaii, did a Norwegian cruise around 4 or 5 of the islands, spent about 6 days out there, and hit a bunch of the islands. It was a lot of fun. I had no idea how far Hawaii was from the West Coast. Blew me away.
The nice thing about when you leave the West Coast, all the flights to Hawaii are nonstop.
Yeah, that's true. That's good.
At least we cross our fingers that they are.
You certainly hope they're nonstop. And that's there's two places in our lives. Like I said, my wife and I, we've been married 33 years now. Two places we've gone. One, years ago, we took a cruise and we went down to, we were in Key West. Mm-hmm. And when we went to Hawaii, both those places, when we got off the boat, I told her couple hours in, I said, we don't have to get back on the boat if you don't want.
Oh, there you go.
We have a grown son now. I said, let's just call our son. He can sell everything that we have. We'll stay where we are. I was good with staying in Key West or Hawaii. Didn't matter to me. But of course, my wife keeps me grounded. She brought me back to Georgia. She said, at least you got to retire before we move away completely. So that's where we are with that.
There you go.
So, okay. You are a square dance caller, sir. I've known about you for a long time. I've got to listen to you a lot on YouTube and different things like that. You have record labels. When did you start square dance calling?
I started in 1977.
Okay.
I've been around for a couple of years now.
Okay.
Started in Hawaii, and when I started out, I think my first group was calling for a senior citizen center. And worked my way up from there. I mean, I was calling in high school. So while a lot of my friends were working for, flipping burgers or something like that, I was out there calling square dances.
A better choice, I think. Absolutely.
I think a better choice, sure.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. So you start off dancing. When did you decide you wanted to start calling? How far in were you?
I started dancing at 72. We're having a bad connection. Is it me or you? I'm wondering.
I don't know. You're just kind of flashing a little bit.
I see that. I may have to move closer to the router. I'm not showing it the weak signal.
I think we got a pretty good signal.
Okay. It's just me flashing.
If it's that, then we'll if we get disconnected, I'll call you back up and we'll get going again.
Okay, sorry about that.
Okay, no worries. So you
No,
start calling, and you have some influences. I mean, Hawaii, obviously, there was some square dancing out there. Who did you have that were your influences that got you going?
gosh, we had a lot of callers, as you can imagine, who traveled in and out of the area.
Mhm.
And so I got to meet a lot of those guys very early on in my career. Um, the first caller I ever danced to at a big festival was, I think it was Ron Schneider and Jack Lasry, and those guys just fantastic, phenomenal. And then Dave Taylor came along, and I got to be friends with Dave Taylor, and he was an excellent friend, an excellent influence to me. When I first started calling, uh, Kip Garvey was one of the first traveling callers I ever encountered, and I recorded his dance. And the funny story is, I listened to that cassette tape back and forth and over and over. I memorized everything Kip Garvey did, every way he hit every syllable. I could do Kip Garvey better than Kip Garvey could do Kip Garvey.
Outstanding. Okay, very nice.
So he was a very good early influence. And over the years, I just met a lot of terrific guys, Dick Ledger, Dick Holton, and they all gave me something that has just stuck with me. Jerry Helt is another old timer who was a great influence that I met when they came to Hawaii, and we maintained a friendship over the years.
Okay. So you keep on calling, and you started getting some clubs. When did you get into deciding you wanted to do a record label and start going that direction?
So I started, my first record was in 1981 for an old label called D&R Records, and they were based out of Anaheim.
Okay.
And it was a gal named Shirley Russell. She got the record label in a divorce settlement from her husband, Ron Russell.
Okay.
And Lee Schmidt and I were friends. And again, Lee and I met when he came to Hawaii. And I think I was visiting up in California. I might have been staying with Lee. And he says, "Hey, you want to cut a record?" I said, "Sure." I'd been around, a little bit. I thought I was all that.
Yeah.
And so we went down to Shirley Russell's place. She was a hairdresser in Anaheim. And so we bebopped into her shop, and he said, "Hey, this is Buddy Weaver, and I want him to record for you." She said, "Sure." And that's how I got going. New York, New York was the first record I ever did.
New York, New York. Okay.
Back in the day. It was shortly after she sold the label, and I don't think it went anywhere after that. Then I went over to Grand Records for a hot second, and then I went with the original owner of Blue Star, which was who was Norm Murbach, and I was with him for about a year or so. And then Bob Elling kind of popped up. He came into my dance, in fact, one day. That was back in like 1984.
Yeah.
And he said, "Oh, I just acquired this record label, Riverboat, and I want to get going with it again." And I said, "Sure, sure." I didn't think anything would ever come of it. And I think about 8 months later, I get a cassette tape in the mail, and here are these songs on this cassette tape. He says, "Can you do these songs for me?" And so that's where it got going. And then from there, stayed with Bob until pretty much he went into retirement. He's back now. Does a great job now, but and then during the interim, I recorded for Rick Hampton for a while, and then Ernie Kinney. Ernie Kinney was a very good friend of mine, and he kind of chased me down at a convention and said, "Can I get you to record for me?" And I was honored, and it turned out we became very good friends from that. And then eventually, I think in 2003, I got Blue Star Records and started producing music on my own. Okay. And by that time, Ernie Kinney had retired, and so I was not doing anything for anybody, and so the idea of becoming a producer was intriguing, to say the least.
Okay. So you travel around a lot, I'm sure, and of course you're in California. Tell me about some of your international stuff. I know you do a lot of international things.
I've done quite a bit of international stuff. Done a lot of Europe, Denmark, Sweden. Japan, been to Japan a bunch of times, Taiwan. Back in the day when everybody had a lot of dancers, like even in New Zealand and Australia, a lot more was going on down there. I've been fortunate. Been to Canada quite a few times too. I've been very fortunate. Square dancing's been very good to me.
That's fantastic. I've heard about the dancing in Japan. and how good it is, what a high level it is, and how much fun
Yes.
it is over there. Um, uh, so I've never seen it. I'd like to get over there at some point. I'd love to get into Canada. I was talking, somebody asked me where my bucket list place to call would be, and it's Newfoundland, Canada, just because that's where my mother's family's from.
Oh,
And I've Googled it. I don't know of a whole lot of square dancing that may be in Newfoundland, Canada, but maybe one day I'll find out. So
oh, that'd be pretty cool.
I'd
Maybe
love that.
I should put something like that. My great grandmother's from Puerto Rico, and we trace generations back in Puerto Rico. I should put that on my bucket list of being able to call a
Absolutely,
dance
call
in
it Puerto
Puerto
Rico.
Rico.
Yeah, that'd be
Yeah.
fantastic.
You had mentioned about funny stories, and
Uh-huh.
kind of a funny story. We're calling in Japan, a buddy of mine and I, and we're doing this weekend, and we were both on the mic at the same time. We're just, just driving it along. And my buddy says, like, something Dixie style to an ocean wave. And 25 squares out there. And just about all of them crash and burn. And I thought, what the heck? What was that all about? And he looked at me like, what happened? So, kind of had to recover, get him back. And then he called along a little bit more. And then maybe a couple of sequences later, he did the same thing. Send a Dixie style to an ocean wave. And boom, every square went down. And again, I looked like, what the hell's going on? And he looked at me and said, pretty much the same thing. It took me one more time when he did it, and I finally realized, and we finished a tip and we walked off. I said, I figured it out. Every time you said, send her Dixie style to a wave, they all did centers Dixie style to a wave.
Wow. Okay.
English is not a commonly spoken language with the square dance community.
Right.
And so it is square dancing as a language, and they took it literal. And it's a center Dixie style. That you must mean centers Dixie style.
Okay. That's
I said, call it
outstanding.
again. Call it again. I want to see how the hell you get out of that.
Oh, that's nice. That's very good. Oh, yeah, I was telling you that there's so many funny stories out there that other callers wouldn't get to hear, and dancers. And kind of the way when I ask people about doing this is when we go to a dance. So if you go to a national convention, if another club hires you to come in for a weekend or something, a lot of dancers won't get to know you other than the 2 hours you're up there and your
Yeah.
little bit of in between patter and singing that you tell little stories or whatever. And like you were said just a few minutes ago, I've met so many nice guys and women and ladies involved in square dancing. They've all been super helpful. It's starting out, and I'm only about 11 years in to calling, and super helpful. Everybody just talking to you and friendly. It's a good group of people for the most part, and
I think it
so
is. Yeah.
I'm certainly proud to be a part of it. Now, with the centers Dixie style, that goes into something I ask everybody. First of all, what levels do you call to?
C1.
C1. Okay.
Yeah.
From basic SSD to C1, what is your favorite call if you had one?
I love working with beginners. So, and since my beginners are now SSD, I really love that. I like to be interesting without blowing them off the floor, kind of like different without being difficult. And I love it because they're all new dancers. And so when they get it, their eyes light up and they let out a hoop and a holler, and I'm happy about it.
Okay.
When I'm dancing, and if I'm calling and dancing, if I've got a wireless on for whatever reason, I prefer to dance at C1.
Okay.
That's just my preferred, where I prefer to be dancing. But for calling, I love the beginners.
Gotcha. Now, all your record labels, all the songs that you've produced, even if it's not on one of your labels, what's some of your favorite singing calls?
Oh, that's a tough one. That's like choosing your favorite child.
I understand.
And before I forget, I wanted to congratulate you on your first that you did, Troubadour.
Oh,
isn't
wow.
it?
Thank you, sir. I appreciate you saying that. I had a lot of fun with it. Really enjoyed doing it. It was a great experience.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that. Thank you.
Nice job. It is Troubadour, correct?
Yes, it is. Yes, sir.
Nice job. Very good.
I appreciate it. George Strait's a huge, I love that guy. I'm a huge fan of his. And so when I had that opportunity, I didn't want to pass that up. Thank you, buddy.
Terrific.
I appreciate that.
Sure, sure. Um, to answer your question, a favorite. Um, I love the one we did for "Marry You," and I'll tell you another funny story about that one. "Marry You" is a Bruno Mars song
Okay.
that I produced, and I recorded it, and I was very happy with the way it came out. And I was doing a weekend. I was doing a weekend with Ken Bauer, and Ken gets up there and he does "Marry You," and I listened to him. I thought, wow. He just blew the barn doors off that song. I mean, the way he did it. And I thought, well, heck, I can do that.
Yeah.
So I had to go back and relearn the song and do it. And so the standing joke is now when I come in, I tell folks, I said, here's a Bruno Mars song done in the style of Ken Bauer.
It's in the style of Ken Bauer. Very nice.
Yes. Yeah.
Very nice. So coming from Hawaii, and of course you're in California now, outside of square dancing, what is your favorite genre of music? What do you like?
Well, I love Hawaiian music. So when my buddies back in high school were listening to Scorpions and, Elton John and all that stuff, I was listening to contemporary Hawaiian. That was my vibe.
Wow.
That was my groove. And to this day, I still really dig it because it hasn't changed it was like that whole contemporary Hawaiian music thing came out around the late 70s is when it first started. 75, 76 is when it first started to hit, and by 77, 78, it was really the big thing. And it's never really changed much from that format from the late 70s. So I still love that.
Okay. It makes me happy that you said your friends were listening to the Scorpions. One of my top 3 bands of all time. Love the Scorpions. Nobody talks about them because they're just, it's a past. Love the Scorpions.
There you go.
Now
I'll tell you, I was going to reference back one more thing, which is Scott Bennett loves doing Bob Seger stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I love Bob Seger, but I also really love Boz Scaggs stuff. So whenever he's got a Bob Seger release on his, and you'll see that, that's what's laying on my computer right now is whatever Scott's done. That's Bob Seger.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love Bob Seger too. Of course, I'm a child of the '80s, so I'm right in the middle of the '70s stuff, and then the hair bands and all. I'm all over the board when it comes
there
to
you
genres.
go.
So you have a podcast too. Tell me about that.
So I do a weekly podcast. I've done it for quite a few years, and over the last, I'd say 3 years, started introducing more of a vocal narration, a little bit of storytelling on what the feature is. And every feature is a snippet of something having to do with square dancing. It may be from an album cut, and it's all the albums, for example, that were produced on the labels that I own. So it's starting, and the albums have been done pretty much chronologically, starting from the very first album, which was a Marshall Flippo album. And I try to talk about who Marshall Flippo was, the year that it was released, and what was happening in square dancing that year, the kind of music that was popular at that time, the tempo of dancing, the kind of dancing they used. They didn't have ocean waves, they didn't have square through. So, it was really using maybe 50 calls in a very creative way. Another feature that on a different week might be a vintage reel-to-reel dance, or a dance on cassette from some of the guys. And I tend to feature a lot who I think some of the best in the business. A lot of them are no longer with us. Some of them are going to be live dances that are current, SSD dances, plus dances that are from people who are still around. Well, I do a lot of SSD, so I'm still around, and I plan to be for a while. Yeah. And so every week I put that out, and I try to touch on. I've had people give me just boxes of reel-to-reel tapes, and so I'm able to bring the reels onto digital and research the people who are on there, and I go back and talk to the people who were their friends. So in the case of, let's say, like I'm trying to pull some, Larry Ward, for example. I happen to know Larry Ward, but I've talked to other people who also knew Larry Ward to get a little bit more of a background on him, so that it's a bigger picture, and you hear the music, and you hear the calling, and you hear the style of what was happening, and you can hear in the live dances the people cheering and letting out the whoops and all that. And you can hear when the caller makes a mistake, and he'll say, "Oops, oops, let's go back and try that again." And it's all very cool. I think it's a great way to remember some of the people who are the foundational callers.
Yeah, absolutely.
Before us, yeah.
It's good that you have something like that, so you kind of keep that history's there, and it's still somebody who can find it if they want to look into it, because it helps to know where it comes from and where it's going. And so that's really nice. I'm going to go a little deeper into that. Now, where can you listen to the podcast?
There's a number of ways. You can go to the Buddy Weaver Music site,
okay,
buddyweavermusic.com, and you can click on the podcast link. You can go to americansquaredance.com and click on the podcast link, or you can go to buddyweaver.com, and you can go on to I think it's on iTunes, Apple, Google, just about every podcast platform. If you just type in Buddy Weaver Music Podcast, it'll come up there.
Outstanding. We'll do that for sure. Love to listen to that.
Thank you.
Oh, absolutely. So what were some of the other things I wanted to talk to you? Oh, since you have been to a lot of countries, a lot of places, a favorite hall that stands out to you, whether it could be some little tiny place with one square or a giant national thing, what stands out to you?
There have been some memorable halls that I've been to, and the one that when you first asked that question, the one that popped in my mind, and I don't know if it's still there. It's actually here in California, Northern California, a little town called Placerville, and which is originally like a gold mining town, and they had I think it was an Odd Fellows Hall, is what it was, but it was a second story, built back in like the 1918 period of time, before 1920. So it had this one long staircase, no landings, right? The kind of staircase that if somebody's coming down, they miss a step, it's going to be tumbleweeds all the way to the bottom. But when you got on that hall, it was built on the second floor, and they had a wooden floor built on leaf springs. And so when you walked on it, you could feel the floor giving as you walked on it. And they had chairs mounted like almost like pews along the side, elevated so that it didn't sit directly on the floor. And then the caller stage set up high. But everything had a certain amount of movement. And I can remember that if the dancers were in perfect sync, and it would be like 18 squares, they're in perfect sync, you could just see the waves of the floor, just doing this wave. And you'd watch the people sitting on the chairs on the side, just going up and down and up and down. And if somebody stomped their foot at any point, if you got them too excited and they all harmoniously boom at the same time, the needle would jump on the record. Thump. that was awesome. A pretty cool hall. I've
had that a couple times now. I did it myself when we had the little stages where whatever club I may be calling at, the little metal stage or whatever I'm standing on, I get a little out of control sometimes moving around, and I start stomping around with boots on, and back when I used records, it would skip back, and I couldn't realize what had happened. And I was like, why is the music not right? And then I realized that I need to stand still for a bit. Of course, it's a little different now with digital music.
Yeah, It doesn't. It's harder to skip the needle on your computer.
Oh, yeah. So, for new callers, myself, people starting out, somebody thinking, hey, I'd like to do something like this. Any little lessons or anything you want to throw out, advice to a new caller?
I would say that the best advice that I could give to anybody is to be, if you take a lesson from the trades, like electricians or plumbers. Okay, I happen to work in the trades. So in the trades, you have an apprentice, a journeyman, and a master. And there are three very clearly defined levels of performance. And with each level of performance, there's an expectation that comes with it of what you should know. And so if you're an apprentice, you come onto my job and let's say you're an apprentice and I'm going to be mentoring you. Then the first thing we teach you is how not to hurt yourself. And then the second thing we teach you is how not to hurt the customer. So in other words, if it's electricity, how not to electrocute yourself, how not to burn the customer's house down. And then as you become a journeyman, there's an expectation that you know this much more. And then as you become a master, you know this much more. I think I would love to see that imparted more in the square dance calling field. So that as a beginner caller comes in, rather than being a beginner, an apprenticeship. And it used to be something that CALLERLAB talked about back in the early days. So if you're an apprentice caller, let's call it 1 to 3 years, there's an expectation. And the expectation is that you're able to call maybe 2 or 3 tips. And you're able to do it without having to do it extemporaneously. You should be able to do it whether it's from strict memory of the whole tip or from a memory of modules. And you should have 3 to 5 singing calls under your belt. And maybe let's call it 1 year to maybe 3 years. Maybe you don't own your equipment yet.
Right.
But at some point you graduate to that apprenticeship level where you own your own equipment. You're calling a full dance. And then you have goals set that say, I know this many singing calls, but I need to learn 2 more every month. I have a full night's dance, let's call it 7 tips, but I need to be able to have 8 tips by next month and 9 tips by the month after. And there's an expectation, and the expectations are reasonable. It's so that I think too many new callers come in and immediately think they have to go from zero, from an apprenticeship, to becoming a master. And it doesn't happen overnight, or even a very experienced journeyman. That's not going to happen overnight. And I think they get frustrated and they quit because they're not able to succeed. And I think people quit square dancing when they think they don't look good, and I think callers quit calling when they think they don't sound good, or when they're not effective as a caller. Right. That's just my personal opinion.
I understand.
If the dancers can get through a tip and they'll break down, but if they're taught how to break down and how to recover, they'll stick with it. And if the caller, as an apprentice, comes in the same way, is taught, here's reasonable expectations. Hit that reasonable expectation, and that's it. If you want to go beyond it, trial and error, that's okay. But at least you know where the fundamental is. Don't hurt yourself. Don't hurt the dancers.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That would be the one piece of advice I would give. Reasonable expectations attached to something like an apprentice, journeyman, and forget about master. There aren't very many master callers.
Okay.
I consider myself a more veteran journeyman, I guess, who happens to be at it for a long time.
Okay. Yeah, I understand that, and I kind of equate a lot of things to sports and what have you, and yet you can't go from high school baseball to Major League Baseball. There's got to be a junior college, a college, D1, and learn things, because it as sports go, it moves at a faster pace. And I'm not saying that the calling is faster, but you have to be able to see things, make decisions, and while on the fly, while you're up there. So it's a faster pace. And I was talking to a couple of people a while back about it, and you've got to be open to failing. When you have that bad tip and you're just, you feel bad. I feel worse about it than the dancers do, because they don't remember a lot of times if it's a one-time deal. So you've got to be able to just start working your way up. You can't go right into, hey, I want to do a weekend, let's do a cruise, and then let's just keep going. You gotta pay dues, is what it amounts to. So certainly appreciate that advice. I'm going to take it, and I think a lot of other people should. And even on a bad tip, I tell people I've never had a terrible dance. I've had some terrible tips in the time that I've started. But it's something you keep coming back. You got to go back up to the plate if you're going to hit the ball. So,
amen.
Right. So, is that?
Amen.
Yes, sir. Let's get a little bit more personal. Favorite movie?
Oh,
I see. I like to come in cold. So you know, what do you think?
my favorite movie. Well, I mean, the self-indulgent stuff that I could watch over and over again would be like The Mummy. I could watch that, the original,
The original, okay.
please, not the Tom Cruise version, but no, the original.
Okay.
I could probably, if it were to flash on my screen right now, I'd probably watch it, even though I've seen it 100 times.
Wow. Okay. Okay. All right. And I do this too, just to get a feel for where you are, and so I'm going to throw out a couple things at you: Footloose or Dirty Dancing, and why?
Ah, Dirty Dancing, because I've seen it.
Okay. You haven't seen the Kevin Bacon Footloose?
No, no.
Great goodness, that's a classic. Okay.
I know
Well,
it was probably coming on about the time that I was doing a lot of calling.
that may have been, may have been. I think it was 84.
That would be about right.
Yep. And Dirty Dancing was 86, 87, I think. But you can't go wrong with Patrick Swayze. Nothing wrong with that at all. All right. Well, so I'll put these out there, and these are my favorite. Some of my favorite movies is why I brought them up. Braveheart, Gladiator.
I'll have to say the same in Gladiator because I've seen it.
Okay. You haven't seen Braveheart with Mel Gibson?
No, I have not seen Braveheart.
Wow. No. Okay. Gladiator's fantastic. That is my favorite of the two, by the way.
Okay.
Let's see what else. So, are you a TV show or a movie guy? What do you think?
I'll say yes to both, but
okay.
I'll say a yes with a question mark at the end. How's that?
Right. Pastimes, sports, activities. What do you like to do? Not square dancing.
What is this thing you speak of, pastimes, that I have nothing to do?
Maybe you're in California. Do you fish? Do you sit on a boat, or do you like to watch San Diego Padres? Or
I enjoy probably sitting around on those rare opportunities to sit back at home and maybe watch some sports, or if I'm visiting the kids. Yeah,
okay.
They've always got Golden State. My son-in-law always has the Golden State Warriors on, so
Okay.
Whether I like them or not, we're watching Golden State Warriors.
Okay.
I love watching golf because I used to play a lot of golf, and
Okay.
I would love to go back and play that again someday.
When do you think you last played golf? How long?
12 years ago.
Okay. Yeah,
I just got too busy for it. I mean, we used to tee off. We used to be on the tee at 5 a.m. in the dark, my buddy and I, and we'd have our balls teed up and say, "Can you see yet? No. Can you see yet? No. Can you see? Yeah, I can see. Go ahead and hit."
okay.
And he'd hit. I'd watch where his ball went, and I'd hit, and he'd watch where my ball went, and that's how we play 18 holes in an hour and a half.
Wow.
And by the time that we were done, we were coming up to like maybe the 16th hole, my phone would start ringing because it's job sites. What's going on? And I would start ringing in. My buddy would get pissed off at me. Turn it off. I said, I'm not going to turn it off. That's $1. That's money calling me.
Yep.
And then he'd start spraying the balls, OB. And I'd say, oh, ball's OB. Let's go. Rah, 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 rah. Thanks for the round. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's outstanding.
Yeah, that got to be no fun.
Yep. I play probably once or twice a month now. Friday afternoons typically I go. We've got several courses around me that you get the twilight deals where you go at 5 in the afternoon. Doesn't get dark till 8:30, and $25 all you want to go. And so my wife will go out and drive the golf cart, and then I'll just get out and hit balls all night until it gets dark.
That's nice.
So I love playing. Nice. Absolutely.
We bought our house over here just because we're on the golf course. Well, the golf course is one street behind me.
Right.
But I've only played that course probably 12 times in all the years we've lived here.
Gosh, that's tough. As close as it is, you got to get out there again, man.
I've used their driving range 100 times, but
okay.
Tough course too.
Yep. So coming from Hawaii and living in California, beach, mountains, desert, plains. What's your choice? Beach.
Love the beach.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Are you going to be at the Nationals in Alabama?
I will be there, and we will have a booth set up there for the American Square Dance publication.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, anything else you want to talk about? Do you have any big dances coming up? Not national convention. I mean, you're going to have a booth and all that. Anything else going on? Any cruises or anything you got going?
Well, we have our trip to Hawaii. We go there every the first part of every December, and Ken Bauer and I started doing that. I think about 8 to 10 years ago. And as long as Ken wants to keep going, I'll keep going. And we enjoy it. We do the Aloha State Festival, and it's a chance really that I mean, I love going back to visit, but I love sharing Hawaii with other people, you know, who've never been there. But we do our own thing. I mean, we have our own charter buses that go to places that I like to go to. They're not on the beaten path. You know, the tourists will come into Hawaii and never ever hear about the places we ever go to, or eat at the places we eat.
I'd like to do that sometime. That'd be great.
Yeah. So that if I could push for that, and I mean, we have our regular weekends we do every year. The one that's growing is the one out there in Paris, Texas. That's Labor Day weekend, and that one has been on the upswing for the last few years. So, and it's good. You know, we came back. We were strong before COVID, and we came back after COVID. Actually, a lot of our weekends have done pretty well. The Yuma weekend, we had 18 squares. The Solvang weekend, we're sold out for 24 squares for next year already. So the weekends are doing pretty good. I'm actually very enthused about square dancing's future by looking at the weekends. I think club dances for a lot of clubs are down.
Yeah,
I know our club dances are down. I mean, our SSD dance, which is plus an SSD. Pre-COVID, I would have gone out there and had 14 squares, and I think now we get closer to about 7.
Okay.
So we're down about 50%. Up in the LA area, I have my advanced group, and before COVID, we were running around 13 squares, and now we're sitting at, well, we had 7 last week, Wednesday. So there it is. It's about 50% down.
Okay.
Good numbers. Good numbers. I mean, don't get me wrong. But it's nice to go out on the weekends and still see the 18, 24 squares and 35 squares like we have out in Paris.
Yeah, that's a good thing with the internet, because I mean, we've got several little clubs around this area, and so I'll hit some of them. The club that I have is 2, sometimes 3 squares normally with our members. And we're kind of out North Georgia. There's nobody really around us, so it's just usually club members. And some of the other local clubs, you'll hit 3, 4 squares on a good night, maybe 5 if you're really pushing. But then I'll look at YouTube and I'll see somebody doing a weekend, you know, where you got 2 or 3 callers, and I'll see 8, 10, 12, 14 squares, and I'm like, okay, so it's still out there. So it's promising when you see that, for sure.
Yeah.
So
the square dance, the future of square dancing is going to be different, I think, than what it was pre-COVID. I don't know how different, and I don't know what it's going to look like yet. But I do know that a lot of us are trying different things, and you know, my club said let's do SSD. I really pushed them hard on it. I said, guys, we're a plus club. I said we came back from. I said I think we're going to come back from COVID with a 50% of what we had before. And I said, guys, I don't know that we can wait a year to get enough club people to come in. And they agreed. And it turned out I was a little bit right and a little bit wrong. I was wrong. We were actually lost about 60% of our membership, not the 50 that I predicted. But I was right in that we were able to get more people to come back in. We didn't, here in California, you know, COVID has come and gone and come and gone and come and gone, and the media plays it one week and not the other week, and you could just see it took its toll on our beginner classes. I mean, we could have 28 people in a class, and then suddenly the news media talks about COVID resurgence, and there it is. Next week we've got 23, and they're wearing masks, and then before you know, we're down to 18. And the whole media just really did more to devastate it. And I think we're finally past it. I think they've all finally said it's over with. So right now we've got in our beginner program 19 people in our class
19?
right now.
Okay, fantastic.
And that's pretty good. So
yeah, it was just listening to the news back in those times. I felt for California and a couple of little places. because Georgia opened up pretty quick, Florida did, and certain areas. So I really felt for the folks that were in California, the handful that I know, and everybody else, just because of what you had, whatever your opinion was on it, you still had to live with whatever the rules were in your local area. So I'm glad y'all made it through, and you're starting to come back pretty good. So
yes, finally, I think we're finally done with the whole media blitz on COVID.
Yes, sir.
We can't wait for the next one. Yay!
Yeah. Hopefully they'll hold off for about 10 years and we can get numbers back to where they used to be and we can just do it again. So who knows?
Yeah.
Oh. Well, Mr. Weaver, if I don't talk to you again, buddy, I will see you in Alabama in a few weeks. I really appreciate you coming on doing this. Like I had told several people that I met you once or twice just in passing at CALLERLABs, what have you. And this past year at CALLERLAB, got to talk to you quite a bit. And so big influence of mine, just watching you. I don't get to see you at dances because we couldn't be further apart in the United States, Georgia and California. But I appreciate everything you put up, what you're doing with the podcast and your YouTube stuff. I listen to a lot of stuff. I steal a lot of stuff. Some of your patter. And but I think that's almost like imitation. It's like flattery. If I grab something from you or Justin Russell or Hunter Keller or Tony Oxendine, it's just because I'm like, man, I couldn't think that up. So I appreciate everything you do, sir. It's a pleasure talking to you. Everything, we covered it. Anything else?
Charlie, I thank you very much, and thank you for what you're doing out there in the square dance world with this podcast. Thank you very much.
Thank you, buddy. It was good talking to you, and I will talk to you soon.
Very good. Thank you, sir. Bye now.
Sir. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.